Whenever you guys are ready, go for it.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Sally, Jesse, Raphael. Did you ever watch that?
Of course I did.
I'm not going to be able to. All right.
All right.
I'll start for real. Welcome, everybody. This is the first and most important episode ever of our new video webcast series. It's called Between Zak and Aaron, and I'm your host, Zak Aarons. On this program, we are bringing you the leading lights in venture capital, startup technology, and in limited partner investing universes. But today, I wanted to offer the first ever post to an old friend of mine.
Very young friend of
who's
yours.
very young
Yeah.
still, but an old friend of mine who has a lot in common with me. She is the co-founder and managing director of venture capital firm TMV, based right here in New York. But you're not somebody who just moved to New York. You are a native New Yorker, as am I. We also send our children to the same school, so we have similar values in terms of shared pedagogy.
And pay-to-play education.
Pay to play education. So it's a great privilege. She's been an entrepreneur early on in the New York ecosystem. We're gonna get into that. She has been an employee at some of the top media companies out there before dipping her toe into the startup ecosystem. She's been a very successful angel investor and parlayed that entire career into founding her current firm, TMV, which we're also gonna talk about. My great privilege to introduce Soraya Darabi. Welcome to Between Zak and Aaron with Zak Aarons.
It is an immense honor to be here, Zak.
Thank you so much. We're gonna get into some zany topics, but let's get the sort of career and background stuff out of the way. So I mentioned earlier, you're a native New Yorker. What was your upbringing like here in New York in the early 80s, into the 90s, and how has that informed your current profession as a venture capitalist?
Wow, that's a lot. Right? Okay. New York has informed everything for me. I was born in 1983 at Columbia Presbyterian, where my mother was born and my daughters were born. Grew up in Morningside Heights and Riverside Drive, but close enough to Harlem for my dad to say that I'm from Harlem, right? It matters when it matters. My mother taught at Columbia. My dad drove a yellow cab in New York City, but crucially, he owned his medallion, right? So that was maybe my first glimpse into what it means to be an entrepreneur. Buy low, sell high.
Wow.
Yeah, and I basically lived for a while in the front seat of my dad's yellow cab, watching him pick up customers. And my dad's incredibly educated man, like a lot of immigrants you'll see in New York City. You know, he would have with him a backgammon set, books of Hafez poetry, or anything he wanted to be reading, Dostoevsky. And we would talk about literature, we'd talk about poetry, but we'd also talk to the customers in the back. I was painfully shy, and my father would ask me to talk to them in order to collect the tips. It was just a fun game that he had, but that game was actually the building blocks of what I do now. I'm able to talk to absolutely anyone about absolutely anything. And it's a gift in life to be able to feel comfortable in most situations, I would say. So let's call that ground zero. Then you asked, what was it like growing up in New York City in the 80s? I mean, you remember, it was a completely different city to what it is today. But, you know, to be from here is to love this place. And so I've, watched New York evolve, and I've evolved with it. And I'm incredibly invested in New York succeeding as an ecosystem, as I know you are, and MetaProp is. But then after that, after my early childhood in the city, moved around a fair amount because I'm a university brat as well. So my mom was getting her PhD. We moved around with her career all the way through deanship at the University of Minnesota, back to being a professor, and now she's professor emeritus. So we lived in, I think I counted once, 6 or 7 houses between childhood and let's call it college. And being exposed to all of these different geographies was actually really beneficial as well, for the same reason that I talked about before, just like embracing change, feeling comfortable with disruption, feeling comfortable with what's next. A lot of people don't have that experience of just like having a good thing and then life as you know it is kind of ruptured because of an important decision that you need to make as part of a team, and the team in that case is your family. And so felt comfortable with a lot of the themes that I coach founders on today, from just like starting at a new school or trying out a new sport or just, honestly failing and not being great at something right out of the gate. So that's kind of how like the foundation of who I am today was formed. The career that you referenced, I worked as an intern for Sony Music and the Washington Post in college. I went to school at Georgetown, had a great run there, but was always called +1 in college because for Sony, I would get a lot of +1 tickets to concerts. They'd be like, hey, +1, can I come with you to XYZ? And that was my nickname. And then after Sony, focused on convergence for the WashingtonPost.com, helping them understand what things like RSS stood for, which led to an amazing opportunity at Condé Nast. Back when they were forming their digital division, they used to call it Condé Net, now it's Condé Nast Digital, but helping kind of form the earliest understanding of what these new technologies are all about. And fortuitously, the first year that I was there, Condé acquired Reddit. At the time, it was positioned as Wired Magazine acquires Reddit, and that ended up being great trade for them. I think that I was hugely inspired by Alexis, Steve, and Aaron walking through our doors in 2006 and seeing how they, as young people, were basically changing this legacy media institution, honestly, for the better. I wanted to be a part of whatever it is that they were doing. And so followed them for a little bit, and then other entrepreneurs around to New York tech meetups back when I think Dawn and I were the only women going to the New York tech meetup. And when a meetup would be like a party at a bar for 10 people. And interestingly, of those 10 people, half of them are wildly successful today just by sheer numbers and also because they were hitting timing right on the clock.
What year was this, like 06, 07?
2006, 2007. Through osmosis, by being surrounded by this incredibly talented, apt, cool pool of interesting entrepreneurs, I kind of became one myself.
How did you know you wanted to initially pursue something in media? You mentioned you were at Condé Nast, they acquire Reddit, it's a dawn of a new era, we'll get into it, but you're working at the Washington Post, you then go on to sort of shake things up at the New York Times as social media is just launching. So what led you to wanting to get into the intersection of technology and media at that time when it maybe wasn't so obvious?
It was probably a few things. One is, always been an avid reader. English was one of my majors in college. I just thought I would write. I think I wrote my college admissions essay on wanting to be Diane Sawyer, and so it was so neat a few years later to actually have lunch with her because of my work at the New York Times. That was incredible. What I learned from that exchange, by the way, just to kind of double click on Diane, is that she did not let me get a word in edgewise, in the sense that I wasn't able to ask her any profound questions because she is such a consummate journalist. She just wanted to know everything about social media that I was gleaning from my work at the New York Times at the time. Fascinating, but also just a really good lesson in, how listening can lead to success. I worked as an intern, as I mentioned, in music and at the Washington Post, in part because those were the most interesting internships I could find as a college student in DC. And what a hack it is in life to intern, especially if you're smart enough or lucky enough to live in a city that is attuned to what you ultimately want to be. I don't think that people think about that enough when they're applying to college. Go to a college that has some industry that leans towards what it is that you ultimately want. And so I did that in DC, and I wanted to be a journalist. But when I got to the Washington Post, I realized that a lot of the journalists I revered, the ones whom I looked up to the most, were not digitally savvy at all. And to their credit, this was 2004, 2005. But it felt like an opening. And so a lot of entrepreneurship in general is just looking for an opening and seeing where your skills might fit. And I was able to, again, because of the chutzpah or the willingness to go up and talk to anyone about anything, kind of break through the boundaries of I'm a lowly intern into, hey, would you like me to show you how to do this thing? And that led to a job of, hey, would you like me to show you how to do this thing at 3 different media institutions? And so really my work at the New York Times, which you referenced, that started in 2007 at the advent of social media. That was really just kind of replicating a pattern I noticed at 2 other media organizations, which is that there is a great amount of respect and also willingness to try new things at journalistic organizations, right? Going back to the Diane story.
And exploiting a power niche in a non-obvious niche that's growing very fast. I see in a lot of your career today, on a larger scale, is mirroring that, right? TMV is not specifically focused on 1,000 different categories, right? Like your firm is making investments into maritime and logistics, you're making investments into AI and automation, investments into healthcare and living better, right? You're not spraying around in tons of categories, similarly to how you identified this one niche that eventually got much bigger. I interviewed you a few years ago for my course at Columbia.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me that your first day at the New York Times, you had a very radical suggestion to the top brass there, which was that you wanted to have your email address as Soraya at NYT or
Wow, you
NewYorkTimes.com,
remember that. Yeah.
or whatever their URL, I think it's NYT.com, was back then. This is in 2007. Also, I think just having the guts to ask for that, right? And also the confidence that it was the right decision and the data to sort of back it up based on more experience than a lot of these people had.
I also wanted to meet the IT department face to face.
Smart.
Introduce myself to all the engineers, and I wanted a Mac and not a PC. That broke the internet there.
So you got Soraya, right? And then you started messaging all of these people with this email address, and it was sort of a breakthrough of the old order. Like, we're an institution, we've been around for centuries, but we are going to effectively operate under
not centuries,
a new
maybe a century
digital
and a half.
paradigm. How old is the New York Times? 1860?
It's probably 175 years old now, give or take.
They were certainly old enough to take the name for Times Square, which was in 1903. So they were around by then, but I think they probably started sometime around before the Civil War.
Okay, now we have to pause and figure this out.
We have a fact-checking army that's gonna... Fact checkers, when was the New York Times first published?
How many years old is the New York Times?
174.
So I was off by a year.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were called +1 at Georgetown.
Yeah.
Because you had concert tickets. What was the best concert you went to?
The best concert I went to was not necessarily a band that I was a fan of, but it was so much fun. I was working on, this is my 18th birthday, September 10th in 2001. Interestingly, a day before you know what, but I was working on the band Queens of the Stone Age, and opening up for them was Phantom Planet at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. And it was my birthday, I was turning 18, and one lead singer of one of those bands asked me to go behind the 930 Club to the McDonald's and buy him some weed. And I just thought, oh my God, I can eat it.
Is Phantom Planet Jared Leto's band?
No, it was
Jason Schwarzman.
Jason Schwartzman, thank you.
No relation
To
Zack Schwarzman.
Between
Zak and
Aaron.
So you make a splash at the New York Times, but you realize that you want to try your hand at that point. We were just remarking, we have this zine for the 30 plus anniversary of Silicon Alley. At that point, Silicon Alley has been around as a concept for a while, but is really exploding. There's all this energy in the ecosystem. Startups like Foursquare and Kickstarter and Tumblr, and all these are being built sort of right in our backyard. And I'd imagine with your new mandate at the New York Times, you're sort of the one tasked with interacting with these startups. Is that how you became sort of like enmeshed into the startup ecosystem? We're now 2007, 2008. Walk us through what's going on there.
Yeah, well, I would actually say that that was the mandate at both Condé Nast and the New York Times.
Got it.
And I give a lot of credit to a couple of the three Reddit founders in particular, because they were kind enough to invite me to things early on. But actually, I cold emailed Mike Arrington when he was at TechCrunch saying, would you be interested in the news Wired acquires Reddit? And he ran with it, and it became, I believe, the most read story on TechCrunch that year. And as a thank you, he invited me to something called TechCrunch 50, which is now TechCrunch Disrupt. And for a while, he made me one of the panelists to judge startups, right? I would say another kind of way in which I met founders was just going back to what you said before, cold messaging them. So I just guessed Jack and Ev's email addresses at Twitter back when Twitter was in beta and said, hi, my name's Soraya, I'm at the New York Times. And actually at one point I took a screenshot of this because it was so epic. And he took my email and Jack tweeted it and said, my favorite organization is now on Twitter. I didn't have the heart to tell him, it's not really your whole organization, it's like three of us, but it was a good moment, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
It's huge.
It was huge at the
earned
time.
media.
that was really how we kind of did it back then. And we were the first brand to partner with Facebook. And I was the first fan of that first fan page, back when we called them fan page. We called it the beta approach to learning. What can you do to try out these companies and to put your training wheels on before anybody else knows that they exist, and then take the training wheels off so you're more comfortable and you can kind of partner with them on and on and on. That was more or less our approach. But when I say our, I don't mean like a department of 3. There were 200 people on the digital team, each one more impressive than the next. I can't believe I was so lucky in my early 20s to be working with those legends of industry who are now, far flung across every dimension of media and tech that you can imagine. I played a very small part in something that became extraordinary because we were very early. But then what the organization did after that is not necessarily thanks to me.
I prefer to take credit for other people's accomplishments, but that's, reasonable people can disagree. So you make the pivot into not just interacting with these startup companies, but actually working at them. You were a super early employee at Dropio, which is a business where you now work with one of the co-founders of Dropio as a venture partner, my college friend, Darshan Somersaker. Dropio had a ton of talent early on. Sam Lesson, who's now at Slow Ventures and is pioneering an etiquette school for startup founders. Alexa Von Tobel, who went on to found and then sell LearnVest. Will Pang, who's been a VC and entrepreneur in New York. So what was in the water at Dropio, and how did you parlay your experience as a product person into ultimately starting and scaling and selling a successful startup in Foodspotting?
So in both cases, I was lucky to meet the founders. Sam was one of those early people at the New York Tech Meetup that I referenced earlier. And I remember him standing on a stool once at a New York Tech Meetup because that's what we did. There were no microphones and everyone was announcing their startups. Sam stood up on a stool and I was just really impressed by what he was talking about. Just really inspired by how a guy my age with the right idea at the right time and the right network was able to raise capital to create something meaningful out of a burgeoning idea. It's really that simple. And then what was in the water? He's a great recruiter. I'm sure he's still a phenomenal recruiter. And so I was impressed by the people that I met who worked there. A lot of them are actually still friends, but one who was my boss at the time, a guy named Steve Greenwood, he and I would just have these hilarious business adventures, and it made work fun. I remember just being blown away by the fact that I could bike to the office and leave my bike at the office, and that the furniture was, I think, Sam's furniture from his dorm room at Harvard, and it smelled like beer. And I know for a fact that there was a keg in one of our conference rooms. We can laugh about it now because it feels like some sort of Acme Studios version of a startup. But at the time, if you're coming from big corporate America culture, it's everything. Yeah. It's more alluring than a 401k plan to a 26-year-old. And I was just astonished by the speed at which things were accomplished. The culture was just move fast, break things, and also fun. And then you'd stay at the office after work, and there were so many networking events for that Y plus whatever, that you ended up meeting a lot of the people who built the fabric of Silicon Valley.
And General Assembly started popping off at that same time, right?
Well, okay, so again, this is all fuzzy math, but I'm pretty sure that Venmo was incubated at this startup. I know Sam was an angel investor in Cortina, and I know that Tasso Duval used to work out of that office, and Toptal's now a unicorn a couple times over. And Birchbox. Haley and Katya came in with Molly Chen when they were first building Birchbox, and they were sitting across from us in that office over one summer.
A lot of Harvard connections, and I remember Yipit was also in General Assembly.
Cool, smart people ready to build things.
In 2009, Instagram is still bourbon. It's still a Foursquare competitor. The Foursquare API has just launched, sort of unlocking location to iOS developers and Android developers. Also, trends of culinary voyeurism are bursting like wildfire through the world, right? It's the age of molecular gastronomy and chefs putting out cookbooks with food that looks like it's literally out of this world. And so that's the backdrop where we find Foodspotting. Tell us about how that came to be and gained traction quickly and relatively quick and successful exit to OpenTable.
Okay, so when I left the New York Times, the founders of Foodspotting asked me to advise them because I knew how to partner smart startups with larger media companies. And a big part of our early partnerships at Foodspotting involved media companies like Scripps. And was finding myself on nights and weekends feeling really excited about what Foodspotting was building as a food enthusiast myself, but also somebody who was kind of an early proponent of Solomo. Remember Solomo?
Of course, I had a fund. My first venture fund was called Solomo.vc. That's what we tried to launch and we couldn't get it off the ground.
Social, mobile, local.
Social, local, mobile. Solomo.
Of course, that was the name.
Yeah,
it's
John Doerr.
John Doerr Cohen Bococa.
For Borum Hill, Cobble Hill, and Carroll Gardens. Yes. He doesn't get as much credit. It's sort of like Aileen Lee with Unicorn, John Doerr with Solomo, and then
Katarina
also John
Fake with
Doerr
FOMO.
with, is that true?
It's true.
It's
Founder of
impressive.
Flickr.
She was married to Stuart Butterfield, right? They co-founded Flickr together.
Well, he was married to her, yeah.
They had a startup before Flickr too.
Probably.
It was Katarina Fake, Chris Dixon, Zach Klein. Those were like some of the early
venture partners
at Founder
How
Collective.
many listeners of your new pod are going to be interested in how niche we are going?
All of them. Many millions of them.
Okay.
All right, let's bring it back.
All right, bring it back. So,
Foodspotting.
So I was a beta user of Foursquare because I was a power user of something called Dodgeball, 36343 on my BlackBerry.
That was Dennis Crowley's first startup. I was a user of Dodgeball as well.
I loved it. You would tell your friends where you were going, they'd show up.
Yeah.
There was a time when everyone in the New York tech scene was using Dodgeball to show up in real life to places. And that just feels far-fetched now to talk about.
It was great.
It was great. It was so fun.
And then it got even better. We had stuff like Brett Martin doing Sonar, which launched its TechCrunch Disrupt. There were all these things for tracking where your friends
who now runs a VC firm.
He's now a VC too.
Yeah. So what happened to all of us? Anyway, so loved Dodgeball, loved Foursquare, loved that Foursquare was launching an API. We at Foodspotting, I think, were one of the first to partner with that API. And I just thought, wow, this could verticalize. This seems exciting. You can take photos of food, but then you can take photos of other things, match it to the places that you want to go, and it's becoming like the recommendation book of the future. I wasn't the only one to think that. I'm pretty sure Alexa, the CEO of Foodspotting, thought that too. It was also a funny time in terms of media. So I wasn't expecting this, but Fast Company threw me on the cover of their Most Creative People in Business issue during that same era. And some of that glitz and glamour opened up some doors within investors, let's put it that way. And so decided to focus on Foodspotting and join them as their New York partner. And the exit, once again, has more to do with the people who built the product, conceived of the product on the West Coast, and ultimately saw it through to exit. For me, yet another opportunity to have a front row seat to success and an opportunity to just experience the velocity of this ecosystem that we were part of. The founders of Foodspotting asked me to advise them because I knew how to partner smart startups with larger media companies. And a big part of our early partnerships at Foodspotting involved media companies like Scripps. The product was good, but we had no business plan to speak of. And so it was like really trying to recreate the wheel. I think it was also just like great training ground for how to fake it till you make it. A lot of startups in New York, like Foodspotting, had free office space in the Next New Network's office. We pitched them on like the wildest thing we could think of. Tony Bourdain and No Reservations partnering with an app that nobody had heard of, and it worked. And they did interstitials for an entire season of No Reservations with Tony Bourdain. I feel like I could still say the commercial word for word. It was like, eat where Tony eats. But what that story is trying to illustrate is that things were a lot more informal 16 years ago.
More informal than between Zak and Aaron?
Yeah. No, you're still there. You're still in informality land. I really miss that era to some extent. It was so much less transactional than the era that we operate in today. But the building blocks for what we do today formed during that time.
There were many that didn't make it out of that wave, and some were apps that I used, like Yo. Did you ever use the Yo app?
No.
Where you could just randomly write somebody Yo and that was all it did?
Oh my God. Yeah, like a poke.
Yeah, it was like a Facebook poke. And
who built that? Some VC?
I don't know. I mean, they got funding at like $100 million. This was in the age, this was slightly later. This was more in the age of like Secret and Yik Yak, and a lot of that stuff became super toxic. But like, what's toxic about that? You would just send your friend a yo, and that meant, what's going on? Who knows? Do you remember Oink?
No, what was Oink?
So Kevin Rose had this idea to like rate everything. It kind of came out of Foodspotting, and their first product was this thing Oink, and it was billed as Yelp for anything. Like you could pick up like this cardboard cutout or that camera and just like rate it. And so the data was obviously unwieldy, but I have to admit, I did use Oink for a couple of weeks there.
This idea holds up. I still, to this day, receive pitches, I'd say...
Bring it back.
Where people say, bring it back.
Text Kevin after this interview, offer to buy Oink, source code, see if you can get it done.
Yeah, maybe. Should we talk about our group text?
We're gonna get there, but we gotta go a little bit more in the serious formal world for a couple more minutes, because we gotta get into your head on transitioning between being a startup operator, product person, co-founder, advisor, parlaying all that experience into launching TMV. Walk us through how your angel investing career started, some of the successes that you had, and then how you decided to partner with your college buddy from Georgetown, Marina, to launch your current gig, running $200 million AUM venture firm.
Not everything in startup land is up and to the right. Not everything comes up roses. And I experienced through expensive lessons.
Angel investing is an expensive hobby. It's a great way to become a millionaire if you're already a billionaire.
But I was actually talking about even before that.
Oh, even before that.
Sure. Well, I mean, maybe it's expensive for you, Zach, not for me.
So what were some expensive lessons you were learning before angel investing?
I never looked at like the fine print behind an equity agreement before signing it. Amateur hour mistakes, but all we had back then to kind of look to as an encyclopedia was the Venture Hacks Bible. There were no blogs of wisdom.
Very few resources. Yeah, Fred Wilson launched his blog in like, what, 06, 05?
Yeah, we were all reading it, but I think...
And that was the one of one back then, really.
Right. Angel investing for me just began as sort of this inquisitive discovery of, I wonder if I ask a founder if I can trade them quid pro quo style. Actually, Pro Quo was the name of my first startup. If I can trade them quid pro quo style some advice in exchange for some equity, I wonder if that's something they would do. But I was at the time beta testing Squirrel before it became Square and now Block on the iPod Touch.
That's cool.
Holla.
So what was that, 09, 08?
Ish.
Yeah.
I mean, I was only off by 1 year for the New York Times.
No, you're very accurate.
Okay. That worked, and that continued. Just a smattering of companies where I tried to give them more advice than capital because I had no capital. What I had, on the other hand, was immense access without people thinking that I was out for something, because truly I wasn't. And if people think you're authentic, which I was, and which you are, then more doors open for you down the road. Everything's a marathon, not a race, right? So I'm lucky to count some of those people I just kind of referenced as LPs in our fund now. All right, I hope you'll edit all of that out. It was such a word salad.
No, it was great. Well,
it was a real word salad.
Let's segue into talking about the funds.
All right, no. So angel investing, I was at a concert when I met the Casper founders, and just as an aside throughout, I'd never made an angel investment before. I was like, do you have any women on your cap table? Was my joke to Neil, who's still one of my very good friends, and TMV is lucky to be backing his new company, Slingshot AI, which is the first AI foundational model for therapy. But Neil and I
I've downloaded the app, Ash.
Ash, it's awesome.
I've had a conversation with Ash.
Talktoash.com. But we met at a concert, and I just had a beer sitting on their mattress. I'm like, this is comfy. And that led to me being, one of the early angel investors in that company. But then similarly, you have to make up your own advisory term sheets. You have to tell someone you're an angel investor. A few years later, when it was time to sell my position in Casper, I just cold called secondary firms and said, is this something that you might want to purchase? And so I believe was able to sell my shares at kind of a peak valuation for that particular business. Not because they were doing badly. On the contrary, they were doing very well at the time, still are. But I felt like I have to learn not only how to get in, but how to get out on my own dime.
Yeah, important lesson in early stage venture. I
Yeah.
think when you're super big and you're multi-stage, you don't really have the luxury of getting out. You can maybe get out some of your position, but for early stage people, being able to take chips off the table is definitely advisable. Obviously, you don't want to miss out on a huge future markup, but also crystallizing gains is great. And at that time, right, you were probably getting money together for a GP commit for your own fund.
And it's mental gymnastics and juggling a lot of complex relationships, and it's figuring out, what makes sense as a fiduciary versus what makes sense as an angel investor. So yeah, so I parlayed angel investments into companies more or less on the consumer side, like Gimlet Media, which sold to Spotify, or Figs, which had a nice IPO. I transitioned from being more or less angels in those companies into starting TMV with Marina. We got together for dinner. We started to talk about angel investing and how we were two of the only women we knew at that time investing into startups, and like what a coincidence, and we should diligence opportunities together. And that led to us forming our first SPV for Figs, which a few years later, they became the first two women to ring the bell together at the New York Stock Exchange as co-CEOs, which I think is pretty cool. I remember our first memo for that SPV had all sorts of spelling errors in it, but what really resonates to this day is that Marina told me to put into that memo, you can wear these scrubs on the boiler room of ships. Now, her family owns an almost 300-year-old maritime shipping company. That was an eye-opening experience for us, where it's like, oh, Marina's perspective as a growth investor from this completely different industry than the one I come from actually pays huge compliment to early stage investing, because she can see things kind of zooming out with the wide lens, and I can see things zoomed in. Now, why was that comment interesting? Because when they went public on the chyron of the business shows, like the Bloombergs that would talk about the IPO, some of them were saying, oh, gee, we think this business, which was, medical apparel for nurses, we think this business could verticalize into other industries. And I'm like, bingo, that's what investing is. It's like, can you look out 5, 10, 15 years and say, I believe statistically there is a high likelihood chance that this thing will happen. And then when time catches up with your predictions, can you point back at those early hypotheses and say, okay, well, these are the data points that led to that ultimately becoming true. And even better, can you help manufacture some of those data points? We call that the unfair advantage.
So that's like the pilot episode for TMV, because it sits at the intersection of two of your three theses, right? Healthcare investing, maritime and logistics investing. That was one product, right, that you were going to help bring from healthcare into maritime and logistics. So you funded dozens and dozens of companies at this point. Walk me through a couple of your other success stories from the suite of TMV funds. And what do you think, given your background in media and startups, Marina's background, maritime and logistics, sort of later stage large operations, what were some of the things that you all maybe saw that maybe other investors were overlooking at the time?
Really what media companies train you to do is to think quickly and to think on your feet and to be smart. Identical experience to being a VC. But I am very much the managing partner of the firm. My responsibilities differ a little bit from our healthcare partner. She's all in, all day, every day, healthcare, healthcare, healthcare. I do think a lot with a few of the other folks at our firm about AI and automation, which is more or less now the horizontal on top of the verticals in which we invest. So we like to say we have two core pillars. It's health bio on one side, maritime, logistics, and port technology on the other. But the AI stuff touches all of it. And so we have a commercialization strategy at TMV. It used to be everything go to market. Like, we will write your press release and we will help brand you and we will hire for you. And we're effective at a lot of that stuff. We hired 40 of the earliest employees of our first unicorn with them in parallel. But it's too much. And at the end of the day, the only thing that moves the needle for young companies going from seed to A is revenue. So now go-to-market for our firm is really about connecting the dots between really big commercial partners and early stage startups. This was the big unlock for our firm in year 5. And for the last 5 years, we've been almost unilaterally focused on how do we help young companies commercialize. My media background that you cited really parlays well into that, because it's about being fast, asking the right questions, and connecting the dots, and just making tons and tons and tons of introductions. 90 out of the 100 introductions you make will just land on deaf ears. And so it's about trying to enhance and capitalize the 10% that is willing to do what we did at the New York Times, frankly, and beta logo. Now it's been about 80 portfolio companies over 10 years. We do our best to remember all of the names of all of the founders, all of the birthdays, all of the births of babies. One founder just had a kid yesterday, and I'm like, was this Sienna or was this Mila? Like, it's hard to keep track, but we try to be.
I don't even remember their names, let alone the names of their children. So
my point is, it's a little different, right? So we get, today a founder texted us, honest to God faves, right? That to us is our reward. And if we were in prop tech, we wouldn't be getting that text. But like, we see this as a badge of honor. Would these founders work with us again? Because I mean, we're closing a deal today, which is the first founder to ever return capital to our first fund. That's the honor. That's the glory in what we do. It's just like being there for the long journey.
We're gonna segue a little bit. One important thing for the millions of viewers to know about Soraya and me is that we grew up in the uncomfortable generation in between Gen X and millennials. Some people call us Xennials. Some people call us geriatric millennials. My favorite definition, though, I think belongs to Slate, the online publication. They put out an article about us as the Jordan Catalano generation. For those of you who don't know,
my so-called life.
Sorry for you, but Jordan Catalano was the name of the really brooding, fantastic character that Jared Leto played on the too short-lived Claire Danes masterpiece show, My So-Called
But why
Life.
wasn't it the Angela Chase generation? If she was the protagonist and he was like the wing.
Misogyny.
Yeah.
It's misogyny.
Okay.
If you had to pick one character from that show, Angela Chase, Ricky Vasquez,
Ryan Graff,
or Jordan Catalano,
Ryan Graff,
to back as an entrepreneur.
Oh, to back as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, to back as an entrepreneur. Or so Ryan Graff is who you'd want to like be friends with or be?
Yeah, she's my spirit animal.
So Rand's your spirit animal, but why wouldn't you back her then with TMV?
I mean, she'd run away to Vegas with your money.
So she's too much of a loose cannon. So who would you back? Ricky Vasquez?
No, Brian.
Chase?
What was Brian's last
Brian
name?
Krakow.
Brian Krakow.
Why? Because he's really smart?
He's smart. He's the nerd.
Yeah.
He's the one that like can't get
He's
a
the
date.
tinkerer.
He's yearning. He's behind his computer. He's a little stalkery, but he's like quietly absorbing everything.
I have to say, my favorite moment is the end of the series, effectively, where it has been discovered that Brian Krakow has been writing this beautiful love poetry, but it's been delivered through the lips of Jordan Catalano, and they both realized that they were actually using each other in this perverse way to get what they want with Angela Chase, the Claire Danes character.
But I couldn't believe she couldn't figure it out, because when
she should have been able to figure it out.
He had a song called I Call Her Red about his car.
Yeah.
And she thought that he was capable of this like exquisite Shakespearean sonnet.
That makes me sort of question Angela's judgment as an entrepreneur and make me want to back her less. I think Ricky Vasquez could be a really good entrepreneur. Everybody liked him. He was salesy without it feeling like too salesy. I think he could like sell product.
I agree.
In addition to My So-Called Life,
you and I are in a 90210 group chat.
We are in a 90210 group chat with a future guest of this program. You'll hear from him soon, but he spent a lot of his time when he should be working actually developing Claude Code bots to create 90210 trivia. So we're gonna do a little bit of trivia, not the kind that we do on the group chat.
By the way, you didn't ask me which 90210 character I would back.
What do you think the next question is? Who would you back? Is it Andrea Zuckerman? Is it Dylan?
No, it's Rush Sanders.
Rush Sanders. So that's Steve Sanders' dad. So why would you back Rush? I mean, David Silver was kind of already an entrepreneur. He had his own TV show. He was doing things in the media. Why wouldn't you back another media
He lost all the money.
entrepreneur?
He lost his entire trust fund in the Peach Pit after dark.
Wow.
And had to sell it to another Nepo.
Who did he sell it to?
Noah Hunter. Oh. Yeah, the oil magnate.
That's why Soraya always beats me. So Rush Sanders, obviously he was a talented businessman, made a lot of money. He could pay for his son's Dodge Viper. But why Rush and not someone like a Jack McKay, who was arguably Dylan's dad?
He bought Beverly Hills real estate before Beverly Hills was 90210. He should be your spirit animal.
Yeah, I need to do more research into Rush Sanders. I got a cameo gift of Steve Sanders, Ian Ziering is his name in real life, doing a special cameo video for my birthday. I felt really seen.
I saw it a week before you got it, and there's everything I could do to not tell you.
One of my favorite things about Ian Ziering is that he wears a Rush, it's a Rush the band sweatshirt, but the deep fans immediately know it's an homage to his TV dad, Rush Sanders. So you mentioned that David didn't have a great entrepreneurial journey vis-a-vis the Peach Pit After Dark.
PPAD.
We're gonna compare and contrast two business plans right now.
All right, I'm here for it.
It's not entirely in your mandate because it's more like hospitality and restaurants, but like I feel like, you've done stuff around the sector loosely. Would you back the Peach Pit as an investment, which was the 90210 hangout?
Pre or post Nat?
With Nat.
With Nat, okay.
With Nat. Or would you back the Max from Saved by the Bell, which is a more sound financial investment, and why?
They both had limited seating, so there's exclusivity. They both had good-looking clientele, above average food, and they were both in California. So
tough permitting laws over there.
Right. The Max was beachfront property, if memory serves. Right, because people would come into the Max holding surfboards.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's not the Peach Pit. I think that's more like, I don't know,
Peach
vaguely.
Pit's in downtown Beverly Hills, presumably, right?
Or downtown LA?
Or near the high school. It's kind of unclear where,
unclear.
Where it is.
Yeah, but we see like photos of the parking lot. It's not the prime real estate. But when you have PPAD,
right,
performing,
that was the nightclub,
right, and you have like the best artist of its time performing. It's by far the better investment. I mean, Babyface, come on.
Yeah, you had better musical guests, which should have theoretically juiced it at the Peach Pit After Dark. So you would go
and better music because you had a jukebox that was always playing like "How Do You Talk to an Angel?"
Right, instead of like Casey Kasem with the weird sort of 50s.
All right, so the answer is, final answer, buzzer. I'd back the Peach Pit with Nat's catch phrases. So like you'd have to go in, there'd have to be someone named Nat with, everything, the title card, and they'd have to say in a really stern voice to you, Zach, you handle this. You handle this. And then it's a sure thing.
All right.
It's a franchise.
I appreciate that. So let's talk of all the sort of TV characters. When you watch Zack Morris, who I was named after.
Were you really?
Yes.
Wait, I have a Zack story too.
My parents named, even though Saved by the Bell didn't come out, I don't think, until I was already born, my parents knew that they had a premonition.
The biggest lie, and I hope it's like the only big lie I've ever told in my life.
Yeah, I'm ready. Wow. Viewers, this is...
So if you know my dad, this all makes sense, but I had a secret half-brother. Like you find out one day you have a brother, the way one does when they're 10. And I told my friends in elementary school that my secret half-brother was Mark Paul Gosselaar.
But it wasn't.
But I told them Zack Morris because at the time, I couldn't disassociate between the show and real life.
Wow.
So I said, I have a brother. That was true.
And it was Zack Morris.
And Zack Morris.
So I've been watching a lot of the episodes again to sort of prepare for this interview.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because it's so important to me as like a anthropological enthusiast.
Yes.
Zack Morris was really a con artist. When you look at sort of how he operated, he was also superhuman. He could time out.
Which they got rid of in later years.
And he could literally stop time. So he has certain talents. He's definitely a great salesman, although sort of bordering on the edge, right? And he also has this actual superpower where you can stop time. You know, I've looked into like, you know, the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs and they can't. They don't know how to stop.
But don't you think it's Freaky Friday that was something they did in the early Saved by the Bells, then for years just forgot about it, and then brought it back, I think, for the first season of the college years?
Yes.
And then dropped it again?
And then dropped it because it was ridiculous when he was in college trying to do this. So do you, as a esteemed New York venture capitalist, do you back Zack Morris? He's got a super hot, it's a AI automation play for healthcare workers on ships. Okay, this is triple bullseye from a mandate perspective. And the CEO rolls in, you're expecting, you know, a pitch. You don't know who this entrepreneur is, right? And it's Zack Morris. Do you make the investment?
No, but I'm sure Andreessen would.
And with that, Soraya, where can our millions of viewers find you if they want to pitch you an idea, you know, want to join the TMV portfolio, or just want to get some of your perspective on where things are headed in the areas where you focus? What's the best way for people to reach you? Is it on Yo or Yik Yak or?
Drop me a Yo. Team at tmv.vc. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on the socials as much as I used to be, but I will see a tweet /Soraya Darabi for GEO purposes.
And oink. Going forward, we're going to be rating everything on your newly acquired mobile application. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It's been a blast.
Namaste.
I could not have asked for a more engaged and interesting first guest. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Between Zak and Aaron with Zak Aarons. It's our first video series. Stay tuned in a couple weeks for another really fun guest. Thank you so much.